It is 1 year to the day since you testified before U.S. Congress. And I'm so curious what you feel has changed for the better since then, and how much work is there still left to do?
You know, in some really basic ways, Facebook has changed substantially, right? So Facebook had 10 years to release parental controls for Instagram, and it never got around to it until after my disclosures came out. There are other things like Facebook has never had any public programs around trying to be more inclusive on its languages, and they launched something called No Language Left Behind, which is still only a drop in the bucket, but at least they're trying. Internationally, we've seen some amazing progress legislatively. So there's a law called the Digital Services Act, which is the first law that has ever required the major platforms to disclose what risks they have. Like, actually, they would have had to disclose the risks to kids, for example, had this law been passed before. That finally got across the finish line in Europe after a 4 or 5 year push. The information in my disclosures was credited with giving the last gas in the tank to get it across the finish line. So some things have changed, but we still have a lot more work to do.
Facebook has also changed its name to Meta, made this big pivot to the metaverse. What are your biggest concerns about the new Meta today?
The way we got here with Facebook was because of a set of incentives and a lack of oversight. Those incentives have not meaningfully changed. Facebook is still a private company. It's still driven to have to increase usage, increase profits quarter after quarter. Facebook said at its initial launch of the metaverse, we're going to do safety by design up front. But from what we've seen over the last year, is that they're repeating the same problems that they had with Facebook. That the first time they let journalists into the metaverse, immediately women started getting groped. Why didn't they talk to some women beforehand on what might be dangers that they could face in a space like this? So we need to see Meta actively engaging with the public, engaging with experts, and saying, let's design for safety from the start.
So they just said today they're going to ask users for more direct feedback on what they'd like to see in their feed, their algorithm. Is that a positive step in your view?
In my opinion, there's a lot of ways to do this that would have huge opportunities for change. Many people know of kids who struggle with mental health issues, eating disorders. Part of what happens is Facebook's algorithms have a tendency to push people towards more extreme content. You might start something like healthy eating and get pushed to pro-anorexia content. Imagine a world where a kid who's trying to fight against these things, who knows this is a negative influence on them. Imagine if Facebook actually said, hey, we noticed you're looking at a lot of content that other users have said makes them feel blue. Do you want to keep looking at it? Imagine if we had that ability to influence our feeds. Probably a lot of kids would be a lot healthier today.
Interestingly, he told Joe Rogan this story about how he rejected the idea of an angry emoji and then said he wasn't here to design a service that makes people more angry. Do you think that's a little bit of revisionist history?
It's interesting. So when you look at the documents around emojis, the reason why they added them was they wanted people to, people felt bad putting a thumbs up on something that made them really angry. They don't want to be shown as endorsing that idea. It's one of these things where Facebook didn't think about the unanticipated consequences of some of these design decisions. When you make an avenue where you do actively solicit more anger, you're going to get more angry content. So I haven't seen anything in the document saying that Mark said, say no to the angry face. But I can imagine that he wishes he had now.
Now, you testified that only Mark Zuckerberg was holding Mark Zuckerberg accountable. And I'm curious what you think of Sheryl Sandberg's departure after 14 years. Do you think her leaving will change the internal culture? And if so, how?
So so the fact that Mark remains, I think, is the much more significant issue than Sheryl leaving. Mark has surrounded himself with people who tell him the same kinds of stories over and over again. Facebook is just a mirror. It doesn't have responsibility. All these things that we're complaining about have always been present. We're just showing them to people. We don't play any role in this. We have no power. And Sheryl was a voice inside the company who said, hey, we have to get in front of issues. We can't just be reactive. We can't wait for another story to leak. We can't wait for another UN report saying we caused an ethnic violence incident, like what happened with Myanmar. I worry that because we don't have Cheryl's voice inside the company, that the number of senior leaders who raise these issues has gone down in a meaningful way.
Elections are coming up. What are you watching? What's your take on how Meta is handling this new election so far?
I'm deeply concerned about the upcoming election. Other news sources, I believe the New York Times, have reported on how Facebook shrunk their election team from around 300 people to 60 people earlier this year. That's a huge deal. When I was at Facebook, I worked in threat intelligence for the last 8 months I was in the company. And I watched them catch over and over again things like Russian influence operations. There are a number of foreign nations, Russia, China, Iran, even smaller countries, that know that as an open society, as these unregulated, underinvested in platforms show, like there's ways that they can go in there and manipulate our elections. And before Facebook was really trying, they were giving perhaps not the best they could do, but they were really, really trying to blunt those edges. And I can't imagine that they can do an effective job with 80% fewer people protecting our elections.
I know you've been talking to lawmakers. We've got the American Innovation and Choice Online Act from Senators Klobuchar and Grassley. You've got Lina Khan being more aggressive at the FTC. You have the Supreme Court looking at Section 230. What is one way the law could change to have the most dramatic, potentially positive impact on big tech, in your view?
I'm a strong advocate for the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, because right now we can't see behind the curtain of social media. We were able to push for safety features in cars, or founding the Department of Transportation, reducing the fatality rate from automobile accidents by effectively 3.5 times, because we could actually control cars. We could crash test them, we could take them apart, we could understand how they were built and what shortcuts have been made. Right now, we can't do any of those things with social media. We can't crash test it. We can't confirm how it could be safer. So we don't know what to demand. So I hope they pass PATA in addition to Amy Klobuchar's bill.
I want to get your thoughts on, of course, the biggest news rocking social media. That is Elon Musk saying he'll take over Twitter after all. What are the risks, in your view, of the world's richest man owning such an influential communications platform?
The fact that Elon Musk can make a decision to buy one of our public spaces and be able to unilaterally make that decision really shows us how vulnerable we are right now in listing critical pieces of civic infrastructure to private corporations. Now, they're not, even though they functionally work as large parts of our information ecosystem, we have no ability to influence them. They can be bought and sold by anyone who has the money. So I think they're a great illustration of how we've really put a lot of trust and a lot of responsibility into the hands of a private company.
He could own Twitter in a matter of days. Right before a midterm election, he has said he wants to reinstate former President Trump. What are your biggest concerns about that and his approach to quote unquote free speech in general?
So I think there's some big opportunities with regard to how Elon Musk is approaching safety. So the fact that he came out straight off the bat and said, we need to be worried about bots, means he's talking to someone, he's at least talking to some people who know what they're talking about. Because the number one threat to our elections are bots. There are large influence operations that act as amplifiers for whoever owns those networks. And often in the case, that's foreign organizations like Russia, China, Iran. The fact that he's stepping in before the election is a big opportunity. At the same time, I hope he takes time to listen to the security and trust and safety professionals inside of Twitter, because every single social network is different and they all have their own quirks and their own struggles. And so I hope he takes the time to really understand what those teams have done over time so that we don't disrupt things before the election.
Now, according to the SEC, and the Information also did a big piece on this, and there's been a huge spike in the number of whistleblowers that have come forward since you came forward. One of them is Peter Zatko, a former Twitter employee who talked about the egregious flaws in Twitter's own security. What do you make of the rise in these whistleblowers and the role that they can play in providing transparency where Congress has failed to regulate?
If viewers take away only one thing today from the time that we spent together, it's the idea that more and more of our economy is driven by opaque systems now. So, back when we had a more industrial-oriented economy, you could buy the products of those factories. You could interview workers who worked in those factories and understand what was happening. But now we have more and more systems where the important details all live on data centers. All we get to see is our own screens. We're limited in understanding how these systems work or like what choices were made. What are the consequences? Whistleblowers are only going to become more and more important because in the case of things like trust and safety online, there are no academic classes you can take in this today. There's like a few on content moderation at places like Stanford, but that's about it. We're reliant on professionals like Peter to understand what the limitations are in these things. They're our first line of defense, and we need to be protecting them.
What do you think of TikTok? Is there a unique threat posed by TikTok in particular?
I'm particularly concerned about TikTok because TikTok is intentionally designed to be manipulated. It's a system that originally originated in China. And it's a system it's architected from the beginning with controlling what messages are distributed. There are famous there are control rooms you can go into where you can see the most popular content on TikTok. And there have been scandals where things like if you were visibly gay or visibly disabled, your videos got taken down. We should be deeply concerned that this is a Chinese company. Let's say China invaded Taiwan. I guarantee you we would not see any pro-Taiwanese messages going across TikTok. And because it's designed to be incredibly sticky, be incredibly addictive, like you can't passively watch TikTok. Like it pulls you in. You have to engage in order to get the next video. There's like a little hit of dopamine over and over again. It draws kids in. And so I strongly encourage us to look at, do we want to have China having so much influence over our information environment, particularly for our children?
Now, I know you've been on a year of public speaking engagements, testifying before other governments. You also moved to Puerto Rico. You got married.
No, I moved 2 years ago.
Nonprofit.
I moved 2 years ago. Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you were in Puerto Rico. You launched this new nonprofit, Beyond the Screen. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about how has your life changed since becoming a whistleblower, quote unquote, and do you have any regrets?
Interesting. I think the biggest way in which my life has changed is I can sleep at night. Like before I came out, I think anyone who's ever had to hold a secret where you thought other people's lives were on the line knows how hard that is. And I had to get a new passport right about the time I left Facebook. And I had to get a new driver's license this year because I had lost my driver's license. And I looked at those two photos and I was like, oh my goodness, I aged backwards 10 years. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. And so I have been so grateful for the experience over the last year because I know how few public figures that are women have easy lives online. And like, I have open DMs on Twitter and Instagram and no one harasses me. I've only felt supported, and I'm so grateful to be able to give people hope about the idea that we can change social media. We're going to figure out how to do this, and we can do it together.